Hello. We'll use this video to introduce you to Synth, which is a tool for collaborative podcasting in mini bites. Like as it says, you're creating a podcast where people can only contribute to it in the increments of 256 seconds. So what we'll be able to do is set up a podcast for your class or your students, and each of your students will be able to contribute up to 256 seconds in a specific podcast. Or they can create one themselves and have other classmates contribute, or however you might want to set it up. So like we say, this is just short form podcasting where everyone can kind of collaborate into one podcast or one audio entity. So when we go to gosynth.com, gosynth.com is GOSYNTH. And like it says, it's in beta, but it seems to work great in all capacities so far. And we'll get you guys to sign up. So as I'm signing up, I just want to cover the fact that I'm just doing this one video in everything that you will have to do and all the tasks that I'm asking you to do will all just kind of be combined in this video, because Synth is such an easy tool to use that it doesn't even merit multiple steps or multiple tools. So once you sign up, create your account, it'll take you to a page that looks like this, which is your feed. There are three options or three places that you can go within Synth on your side of things, and that's the feed, the explore tool, and podcasts. The first thing that I'm asking you to do, as you see in the Google Classroom assignment, is just to listen to the Synth overview. So in order to listen to Synth overview, you just click on that tile. It will load up, and then on top of it is the graphic for it to listen to the sort of the base podcast of the Synth overview. And then from there are multiple comments and multiple other people who are contributing to the Synth Overview podcast. So again, in that 256 seconds, people are adding their own 256 seconds contributions to an overall podcast. So now that we're here in Synth Overview, you can just click this play button, and that gets you going on the Synth Overview. And after you listen to that, all synths are open to being able to add to the thread, essentially, or add to the conversation in addition to comments. So you see below it is the thread, and then also you can choose to do written comments if that is more your style. But in order to contribute to that, you just click this like glowing note symbol that's right underneath it. Again, that's not a requirement. I'm just kind of showing you how it works. But if you listen to the Synth overview and you choose to contribute to it for the greater good of the world, then certainly you're welcome to. And that is the first step, is listening to the Synth overview so that you have a little introduction to Synth itself from the people who have made it. Once we close out, or once you have done that, we'll start to explore the three top channels that are up here. So we've been to feed, and we can explore. Explore is just all the public podcasts that are out there that you can find, and this is people who have created their own podcasts or their own little talks of everything that they want to do, and all of the different ways that they're using Synth to get their thoughts out there, expand their personal learning network, expand their professional learning network, expand their own minds, or just to kind of explain something and get information out there. So let's add to this library of Synth so that we can learn how to do it, and that'll happen under podcasts in the top channel. So if we click podcasts, we have the option to create a podcast, or there's all the other podcasts that have been created as I've tried to figure things out. So I'm going to use this opportunity to create a podcast that you guys as students of this class will contribute to. So you kind of get the student idea. So we'll call this the Pod People of Hilton. So because all the titles are hashtags, there's not allowed to be any spaces in there. They only want you to use actual regular letter characters, regular Latin characters. So as you create this podcast, you might have, if you're using multiple words, you'll have to take the spaces out of that. And I'll just say Hilton Educators Exploring Podcasting, Exploring. And we can click in the lower corner, just down over here, is the Start Podcast button, which gets us exactly where we need to be. So as I click Start this podcast, now we have the ability to put the podcast and all sort of the teacher logistics that come in to using this podcast. So you can share the podcast. It's got a simple thing there, but what you really care about the most at this point is this add participants with the code. So you can copy the web link, which is up here, and the code, and then students will be able to contribute to that podcast using FFOSMEG, which is exactly what you're going to do. So I can copy the web link, or it's very simple since following this video, you might already be in GoSynth.com, and you could just create podcast in which, and there's a little space on top of create podcast that allows you to put in a code so that you're able to do that. So what we will now do is, now that all this is here, you can also embed, but that, I think it's very easy to go in there, but if you're advanced enough that you want to embed it into something else, you're welcome to. And we'll keep it unpublished for now. So all synths in the podcast will be discoverable to explore feeds and shareable feed, but we're just not going to publish it just yet. So I'll cancel out of that. And now here we are in this Pod People of Hilton synth that will hopefully have added to. So I will need to add something first, just to kind of get the ball rolling. So in order to add something first, I will just click this plus button that is right here. And then I will also be able to use these other tools that are in here to be able to add a little artwork. Maybe I'm going to share the podcast with you, and so that's there. And then eventually download will come up in here as I need it, and if I want to change those settings really just takes you back to that initial page, which is all right here, and it's those and it's those things. You may want to choose in settings the moderation mode so that you see things before they are added to it, if that's a certain if that's in your purview, and if that's something you're worried about. Just be aware that in settings, moderation mode is in there so that you have to approve all that happens in there. So I will create the initial Pod People of Hilton contribution. Once you click the plus button that's over here to start contributing to our podcast, this option comes in. The start button is clear as day, as you can see. But just keep in mind that you can also upload audio. If you're having an issue, that's a great workaround. Or if you need to upload the audio from something else, or you're uploading something from some other piece of music that you own or something like that. So just kind of be aware that that is happening. And then you also have the option to add in a camera feature that makes it a little bit more like Flipgrid, or you can just turn it off to just do the audio. I will. Okay, so I just recorded the initial podcast for Pod People of Hilton, which is the collective and collaborative podcast that we're creating for this class so that we can have the student experience. And it takes me to this screen, which gives me a few choices. So I can play what I added to it. And then up here, just notice this. On top is transcription on, and the toggle switch to have that happen. So that's really useful for your students that might have IEPs or might have need some assistive technology, or just want something to read along with, because it is transcribing the audio that I recorded and the words that I said. So I'm going to keep transcription on, and then it will provide that for me. And over here, a little icon probably came up about a chime. So chime is where you can add a little sound effect from your library or from their library that's able to just kind of give some division between contributions to the podcast. So maybe I'll look through this menu and maybe I'll see the uplifting stinger. Ooh, I'm uplifted. All right, so I'll just add this as my chime, and then that's going to add onto my podcast just as a little transition in there. And then I will click next. And here I can choose the title of my podcast, or of my podcast contribution to the overall Pod People of Hilton podcast. So the title that I'm choosing is Welcome Pod People of Hilton, because I just recorded a little Hilton message. And maybe I'll add a hashtag for EdTech so that everyone knows what this is truly about. And if you need students to add links, or if you need to add a link, that option is there for you as well, which might be useful if they're taking notes in Google Docs or something where there's an added material that they might want. So as we click next, now Pod People of Hilton is in here, and I can just send this right up into Pod People of Hilton. And now within this podcast that we've created, we have the welcome message, and now everybody else can contribute right to it in the thread. So what is now your job to do is to access Pod People of Hilton, and in the thread you can add your audio contribution to our sort of to our collaborative podcast. So a great way of thinking about it is, if you're familiar with Flipgrid, is just think about this as sort of an audio Flipgrid, and this is a podcast is your grid. So what we're really asking you to do is, now I've created the grid, and now we're asking everyone to contribute to it, whereas it will just kind of autoplay through all the students as one entity, and the grid being that entity. So we're just kind of taking that thought process into the audio medium to make it a full-on collaborative podcast. So I look forward to hearing your contributions into Pod People of Hilton.